My GF said, "If you really loved me, be glad for me to be with my soulmate." Now, when she tries to come back, I tell her that I found my soulmate, and she should be happy for me. I woke up one morning to find Chloe standing at the foot of my bed, a look on her face I'd never seen before. That look, and the words that followed, would ignite a chain reaction of chaos that reshaped my entire life. The air in the room felt heavy, almost brittle, as if one wrong move would shatter everything. There was a strange stillness, a quiet dread that settled over me before she even spoke. I met my soulmate. The words were out before I could even ask what was wrong. She wasn't apologetic or even sad. No, she was excited, like she'd just won the lottery, and I was supposed to cheer her on. Her name was Chloe, and we'd been together for 3 years, lived together for 1. I genuinely thought we were building toward marriage, kids, the whole dream. She worked at a daycare center in Seattle. I was in tech sales. We had routines, inside jokes, a cat named Mittens that she'd picked out. And then, one Wednesday morning, everything I thought was solid just evaporated. She told me his name was Caleb, that he worked security at the Westlake Center Mall near her job, that they'd been talking for 2 months, and that she felt a connection with him she'd never felt with anyone, not even me. I asked if she'd been cheating, and she looked at me, offended, like I was the unreasonable one. "It's not cheating," she said, "when it's destiny." I remember just sitting there, on the edge of the bed, trying to process how someone I'd shared a life with could reframe betrayal as some kind of spiritual awakening. She packed a bag that day, said she'd come back for the rest later. Before she walked out, she turned to me and said something I'll never forget: "If you truly loved me, you'd be happy for me and my soulmate." The door closed, and I just sat there, staring at the empty space where she'd been. It felt like someone had reached into my chest and just scooped out everything that mattered. I didn't cry right away. I think I was just too shocked. But when it finally hit me later that night, it hit hard. My brother, Daniel, came over with beer and pizza. He didn't say much, just sat with me while I tried to explain how someone could leave like that, with so much certainty, so little regret. Daniel told me Chloe had always been a little dramatic, a little self-centered, but I'd been too close to see it clearly. Maybe he was right. Looking back, I could remember moments where she'd made everything about her feelings, her needs, her version of how things should be, but I'd just chalked it up to passion. The next few weeks were a blur of numb routines: going to work, coming home, microwaving dinners, avoiding our favorite restaurants, our favorite trails, anything that reminded me of her. Friends tried to set me up, told me the best way to get over someone was to meet someone new. But I wasn't ready. I was still stuck on that phrase she'd used: "if you truly loved me." Like my love was being tested, and I'd failed by not celebrating her abandonment. I thought letting her go without a fight made me noble, mature, evolved. But really, it just made me empty. She texted a few times in those first months, mostly logistical stuff, asking about mail, about Mittens, about a lamp she'd left behind. Every time her name lit up my phone, my stomach dropped. I kept my responses short, polite. I didn't ask about Caleb, I didn't ask if she was happy, because part of me didn't want to know, and part of me was terrified she'd say yes. One text particularly stuck with me. She sent it around 2 a.m. on a Saturday, asking if I remembered the night we'd adopted Mittens. I didn't respond. I knew she was testing something, seeing if I'd engage, seeing if there was still an opening. Around month 4, I started feeling like myself again, or at least a version of myself that could function without that constant ache. I joined a gym, started running, lost some weight, grew a beard, all the cliché post-breakup reinvention things that actually kind of worked. Daniel dragged me to a concert one Friday night, some indie band I'd never heard of. Halfway through, I realized I hadn't thought about Chloe once in 3 hours. That felt like progress. One Saturday, I was at a coffee shop near my apartment in Seattle, the kind with exposed brick and overpriced lattes. This woman in line ahead of me turned around, smiled, and said, "You look like you're deciding between caffeine and a nap." Her name was Isabella. She was a graphic designer, and she had this calm energy that felt like the exact opposite of everything Chloe had been. We talked for 20 minutes, exchanged numbers, and I left feeling lighter than I had in months. Our first date was dinner at a Thai place downtown. Nothing fancy. I remember thinking how easy it felt. How she asked questions and actually listened. How she didn't need to be the center of attention or turn every conversation into something about fate or destiny. Isabella was grounded. She had her own life, her own friends, her own apartment across town, and she didn't expect me to fill every gap or solve every problem. We started seeing each other regularly, twice a week at first, then more. By month 3, I realized I was happy. Genuinely happy. In a way I hadn't been even before Chloe left. She never played games, never tested me, never made me guess what she was feeling. That simplicity felt revolutionary after years of Chloe's emotional roller coasters. I stopped checking Chloe's social media, stopped wondering if she was still with Caleb, stopped replaying that morning in my head. For the first time since the breakup, I felt like I was moving forward instead of just surviving. Isabella met Daniel, my friends, and everyone said the same thing: she was good for me. Stable, kind, real. Daniel pulled me aside one night after a dinner with Isabella and said he hadn't seen me this relaxed in years, maybe ever. That comment hit me harder than I expected, because he was right. Around month 10, I started thinking about rings, about proposals, about actually building a future with someone who wanted to build it with me. The idea didn't scare me the way I thought it would. I took Isabella to the Oregon coast for a long weekend. We stayed in this little bed and breakfast overlooking the water. On the last night, I asked her to marry me on the beach at sunset. She said yes, without hesitation, without drama, just pure joy. We told our families, started planning an engagement party, picked a date for the wedding. I felt like I'd finally closed the chapter on Chloe, like she was just a painful memory that had led me somewhere better. I even found myself grateful in a weird way. Because without that pain, I never would have appreciated what real stability felt like. Never would have recognized how exhausting it had been to constantly manage someone else's emotions. A year after Chloe walked out, I was engaged to someone who actually valued me, who didn't see love as a competition or a cosmic test. And I thought that was the end of her role in my life. I was very, very wrong. The engagement party was supposed to be small, maybe 40 people at this event space in Pioneer Square. Exposed beams, string lights. Nothing over the top, just family and close friends celebrating something that felt so right. Isabella's mom had helped with the planning, Daniel handled the music. Everything was going perfectly, until it wasn't. I was standing near the bar talking to my cousin, Ethan, when I saw her walk in. For a second, I thought I was hallucinating, like my brain had conjured her out of some leftover anxiety. Chloe was wearing a cream-colored dress, the kind you'd wear to a garden party or maybe someone else's wedding. And she had this expression on her face like she belonged there, like she'd been invited and was just fashionably late. My stomach dropped so hard I thought I might actually throw up right there next to the appetizer table. Isabella was across the room talking to her sister and hadn't seen her yet. I felt this immediate panic about what was going to happen, how this was going to play out, whether I should intercept Chloe before she got deeper into the space. I started walking toward her, but she moved fast, weaving through clusters of guests like she knew exactly where she was going. Before I could reach her, she grabbed a glass of champagne off a tray and positioned herself near the small stage we'd set up for toasts. Daniel saw her and looked at me with this what the hell expression, and I just shook my head because I didn't have words yet. Didn't have a plan. Was still trying to process that she'd actually crashed my engagement party. She didn't approach me directly, didn't pull me aside for some private conversation. Instead, she just stood there, sipping champagne and watching. The worst part was how comfortable she looked, like she was observing something that involved her, something she had a stake in. A few guests recognized her. I could see the confused glances, the whispered questions, people trying to figure out why my ex-girlfriend was at my engagement party in a dress that screamed main character energy. Ethan walked over and quietly asked if I wanted him to handle it, meaning, ask her to leave. But I told him to wait, hoping she'd just make an appearance and leave on her own. Isabella finally noticed her. I saw the moment of recognition cross her face. She walked over to me and quietly asked, "Is that Chloe?" I nodded, and she squeezed my hand, saying, "We should just ignore her and let her leave on her own." But Chloe wasn't planning to leave quietly. About 20 minutes into the party, Daniel was supposed to give a toast. He'd gone up to the microphone and started talking about how happy he was for us. And then, suddenly, Chloe was moving toward the stage. She didn't ask permission, didn't wait for an invitation, just walked up and took the microphone right out of Daniel's hand while he stood there, too stunned to stop her. The room went silent. That awful kind of silence where everyone knows something bad is happening, but nobody knows how to intervene yet. Chloe smiled at the crowd like she was about to deliver good news and started talking about love, about second chances, about how sometimes we make mistakes that lead us back home. She said, "True love doesn't give up, and sometimes the universe tests us to see if we're strong enough to fight for what matters." I realized with growing horror that she wasn't there to apologize or even just to cause a scene for attention. She was there to reclaim me, to publicly announce that I was supposed to be hers. Isabella's grip on my hand tightened. I could feel her shaking, not with fear, but with anger. I knew I had to do something before this got worse. I walked up to the stage and held out my hand for the microphone. Chloe hesitated, looked at me with this hopeful expression, like maybe I was about to agree with her, about to validate whatever fantasy she'd constructed. I took the microphone and looked out at all these people who'd come to celebrate Isabella and me. People who had no idea what Chloe had put me through. And I felt this clarity I hadn't felt in years. I turned to Chloe and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "You once told me that when you love someone, you should be happy for them and their soulmate." She flinched like I'd slapped her. I continued, "Isabella is mine. Please be happy for me, and please leave my life." The room was completely silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Chloe's face went through about 5 different emotions in 3 seconds: confusion, anger, humiliation, rage. She started yelling, calling me selfish, calling me cruel, saying I'd never understood her, that I'd never fought for her, that I was making the biggest mistake of my life. I just stood there, holding the microphone, while she spiraled. Finally, Isabella's dad, Richard, signaled to someone, and 2 security guards started making their way toward the stage. That's when I recognized one of them, the taller guy with the buzz cut and the radio clipped to his belt. It was Caleb. Apparently, he'd started moonlighting at private events after his mall gig. The irony was so thick I almost laughed. Chloe saw him at the same moment I did, and something in her snapped completely. She lunged at him, actually lunged, and started hitting his chest and screaming, "You were supposed to be different. You promised me forever." Caleb looked mortified, trying to grab her wrists while staying professional, and his partner jumped in to help restrain her. Chloe was completely unhinged now, spitting, scratching, calling Caleb a failure, calling me a coward, calling Isabella names I won't repeat. They managed to secure her arms and started walking her toward the exit while she thrashed and screamed. Every single person at that party just watched in stunned silence. I saw Caleb's face as they passed me. Saw the exhaustion there, the regret. I understood that whatever Chloe had promised him about destiny and soulmates had fallen apart, just like it had with me. He caught my eye for just a second, and I saw something there that looked like an apology, like he finally understood what I'd been dealing with. The door closed behind them, and the room stayed quiet for another few seconds. Then Daniel grabbed the microphone and said, "Well, that was unexpected. Let's get back to celebrating these two." People laughed nervously, and conversation slowly started up again. Isabella pulled me aside into a hallway and asked if I was okay. I realized I was. I was actually okay, because for the first time since Chloe left, I'd chosen peace over saving her, chosen my future over her chaos. She hugged me tight and whispered that she was proud of me. Something broke loose in my chest, some last piece of guilt I'd been carrying about not fighting harder when Chloe left. We went back to the party and finished the night surrounded by people who actually loved us, who actually wanted us to be happy. When we got home that night, I held Isabella and felt grateful that I'd let Chloe go, that I hadn't fought for something that was already destroying me. The next morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls from an unknown number and a voicemail from Chloe crying about how I'd humiliated her, how I'd turned everyone against her, how I'd ruined her life. I deleted it without listening to the whole thing. I thought the worst was over. Thought that public humiliation would be enough to make her disappear for good. Thought we could finally move on without her shadow hanging over us. I didn't know she was just getting started. I thought after the engagement party disaster, Chloe would finally disappear. That the humiliation of being dragged out by security would be enough to make her move on. But 2 weeks later, I got a call from a lawyer I didn't recognize, asking if I knew anything about a lawsuit Chloe had filed against Caleb, against the security company he worked for. Claiming excessive force, emotional distress, physical assault, the whole 9 yards. She was asking for $2 million, positioning herself as a victim who'd been mistreated by aggressive security guards at a private event. My first reaction was disbelief, then panic. Even though I wasn't named in the suit, I knew this could spiral into something that touched me, and Isabella. It could drag our names through depositions and court documents, local news coverage. I called Isabella immediately. She could hear the stress in my voice and told me to breathe. Told me we'd handle it together. Told me Chloe couldn't hurt us unless we let her. But I was scared, genuinely scared, because I'd seen what Chloe could do when she felt wronged. How she could twist narratives and play victim, and make people believe her version of events. The security company hired a defense team, and I got contacted by their lawyer who wanted a statement about what happened that night, about Chloe's behavior leading up to the incident, about whether I'd seen her attack Caleb first. I told them everything, gave them a written statement, walked them through the entire evening from the moment she walked in uninvited to the moment she lunged at Caleb. They seemed confident they had a strong case. But I couldn't shake this feeling that Chloe was going to find a way to win, to make everyone else pay for her bad decisions. The lawyer mentioned that several guests had also given statements corroborating my account, which should have made me feel better, but somehow made it worse, because now more people were getting dragged into Chloe's chaos. The lawsuit moved forward, and there was a preliminary hearing scheduled for early fall, about 4 months after the engagement party. During that time, I barely slept. I kept imagining worst-case scenarios, Chloe winning millions, the story going viral, our wedding getting postponed or cancelled because of the media attention, my job finding out and questioning my judgment. My boss actually pulled me aside one day and asked if everything was okay, because my performance had dropped. I had to explain the situation without sounding like I was involved in some Jerry Springer-level drama. Isabella planned the wedding anyway. Kept moving forward like Chloe didn't exist. I tried to match her calm, but inside I was falling apart. She'd pick out flowers, and I'd be thinking about court dates. She'd talk about the honeymoon, and I'd be refreshing news sites to see if the lawsuit had been covered. I started having nightmares about Chloe showing up at the wedding, about her filing more lawsuits, about this never ending. The day of the hearing finally came. I sat in the courtroom gallery next to Isabella, watching Chloe walk in wearing a conservative dress and minimal makeup, playing the part of the wounded innocent. She had a lawyer who looked expensive, probably someone she'd convinced to take the case on contingency. He made his opening statement about how his client had been harmed without provocation, how she'd suffered lasting psychological trauma, how the security company had failed in their duty to use appropriate force. Then the defense stood up and mentioned that body cam footage had been submitted as evidence. I felt my heart rate spike because I hadn't known they had video. The lawyer asked to play it for the court, and suddenly everyone in that room could see exactly what happened. Could see Chloe lunging at Caleb, spitting in his face, scratching at his arms while he tried to back away and maintain professional distance. You could hear her screaming on the audio, calling him a failure, calling him worthless, and then see both guards trying to restrain her as gently as possible while she thrashed and kicked. The footage ran for maybe 3 minutes, but it felt longer. When it ended, the judge looked at Chloe's lawyer with this expression that said everything. Chloe stood up before her lawyer could respond and started yelling that the video was edited, that it didn't show what happened before, that they were all protecting each other. The judge told her to sit down and be quiet, or he'd hold her in contempt. Her lawyer tried to salvage something, argued that even if she'd been aggressive, the guards had used excessive force, but the judge wasn't buying it. He dismissed the case entirely, said it was frivolous and a waste of the court's time. Then he did something I didn't expect. He ordered Chloe to pay the security company's legal fees and issued a formal reprimand that would stay on her record. Chloe lost it right there in the courtroom. Started screaming about injustice, about corruption, about how everyone was against her. The bailiff had to escort her out while she yelled threats at Caleb, at the lawyers, at the judge. I sat there feeling this weird mix of relief and emptiness, like I'd been holding my breath for months and could finally exhale, but didn't know what to do with the air. The security company's lawyer told me afterward that they were considering filing a countersuit for defamation and abuse of process, and I said I'd cooperate however they needed. Chloe's lawsuit didn't just get dismissed, it got recorded as a loss with penalties, which meant she now had legal fees she couldn't pay and a record that made her look unstable and litigious. About a month later, I heard through mutual acquaintances that she'd been fired from the daycare center. Apparently, the lawsuit and the public breakdown had made parents uncomfortable, and the administration decided she was a liability. One parent had apparently seen the engagement party meltdown video that someone had posted online, and that was enough to raise concerns about her judgment around children. Then, I heard she'd moved back in with her parents across town, that Caleb had blocked her on everything and gotten a restraining order after she'd shown up at his apartment multiple times, that she was working as a cleaning person for an office building in Seattle. Part of me wanted to feel vindictive, wanted to celebrate her downfall. But mostly, I just felt tired. Relieved that the chaos was finally over. Isabella and I got married that December in a small ceremony with tight security and a private guest list. No drama, no surprises, just two people promising to build something stable together. The venue had strict instructions about Chloe, with her photo provided to security. I hated that we had to take those precautions, but it was necessary. We bought a house in Bellevue, adopted a dog, started talking about kids. I realized I'd completely stopped thinking about Chloe, except as a cautionary tale I might tell someday. Last I heard, she was still working that cleaning job, still living with her parents, still posting cryptic things on social media about betrayal and karma. A buddy sent me a screenshot once of her posting something about fighting for love. I didn't even feel angry, just sad that she'd burned down her entire life chasing some fantasy about destiny and soulmates. Isabella got pregnant in early 2024, and we had a daughter this past January. Holding her in the hospital, I thought about how different my life would have been if Chloe hadn't left. If I'd stayed in that relationship and eventually married her, I would have been miserable. Constantly managing her moods, constantly wondering when the next crisis would hit, constantly walking on eggshells around someone who saw everything as a test of loyalty. She said she just wanted to fight for love, wanted to follow her heart, wanted to be happy. But love doesn't look like destruction. Real love looks like Isabella falling asleep on the couch while feeding our daughter at 3 a.m. Looks like building something quiet and lasting. Looks like choosing someone every day without drama or cosmic signs. Chloe taught me what I didn't want. For that, I guess I should be grateful. But I'll never understand how someone can confuse chaos with passion, can mistake obsession for destiny, can destroy everything around them and call it love. What do you think was the biggest lesson I learned from all this?